you'd be lying. This is the Alfa Romeo Owners Club of Australia's 6-hour race for 1998. And Damien Reid, this is the biggest field assembled anywhere in Australia, possibly the world.
That's right, Nathan. We have down below us there 238 cars lining up at Eastern Creek Raceway. And certainly it is the biggest grid we've seen in Australia. And we're just getting it confirmed to see whether it's actually the world record, which we're pretty sure it is.
Just look at the variety of vehicles we've got down there at the moment. Porsches, open cars, PRBs, Mazda RX-7s, you name it. Anything running here today. I think I've even seen a Chrysler Valiant down there. Well, this was Saturday, the day before racing. The cars lined up for a grid. Let's get into the action straight away now. Sunday, unfortunately, the weather conditions not very good, Damien.
No, Nathan, that's right. But these little cars, they should be flying in the early stages of the race. If any car is going to do well in the wet, it'll be the little PRBs.
Yes, not the most comfortable cars to be driving around in the wet weather, that's for sure, but being open-wheeled and very nimble, they handle extremely well. One of the downfalls of those cars, though, is they don't have a lot of straight-line speed, and with Eastern Creek Raceway having such a long straight, they can lose a bit, but as you say, in these wet conditions, if anyone's going to thrive, it will be those competitors.
Yes, I think they'll, if they get out in front and stay out in front, keep the mist out of their eyes, they should be very hard to catch in these conditions.
Matt Segafredo in the Mazda RX-7 there. We've got Porsches, Alphas, a lot of Alphas, 10 Alfa Romeo Owners Club teams entered here this weekend. Mazda, we're underway for the first of 6 hours here of the 1998 race, and just look at the field. Big variety of cars. WRX in there, four-wheel drive, turbocharged. That's a car that should do well in these slippery conditions. Yeah,
that's a car that's actually competed in the 12-hour at Eastern Creek once or twice. And that should do very well here today, but a huge field, absolutely astronomical. It's we have out in front the sports sedans, as we expected, will be the pace setters of the day, but of course the overall winner is judged on handicap and not so much outright speed. Of course there are teams that are there that are just purely there to win first past the post.
Well, of course this is a very big race, 6 hours as you say. How do you win this event? Is it maximum laps, or tell us about the handicap system?
Well, there are actually two ways you can win this race. One, as I said, is first past the post. That's considered a line honours victory, but the real victory, and the reason why we get such large fields, is based on a handicap formula. And it's a very complex formula, but to cut a long story short, the teams nominate a time which they think they can consistently achieve during the day. They submit that time to race officials. They compare that time to the fastest theoretical lap, which then gives them a number of handicap laps for the difference. And quite simply, if they break over or under that time, they're docked a lap.
Well, if you're not confused yet, you're doing better than me. But it sounds like everyone out there has been thrown a bit of a curveball as well, because what they would have been running earlier on in the weekend has definitely changed as we go on board with Andrew Hunt in the Nissan Group A Skyline. Very quick car, one of the high horsepower cars, but they were running around earlier on in the weekend in dry conditions. Now that it's wet, they're going to have trouble nominating a lap time.
Well, they were actually allowed to change their times to include a wet weather factor in the morning just before the race today. So those times have been taken into account, and the handicapper in the time scoring has the ultimate say over what can and can't run as far as times are concerned. And they sort it out during the day. It's a bit of a lottery, but everyone's in with the same chance, and they have to fight it out, and hopefully the weather will clear up a bit later on.
We can see now the high horsepower car starting to stretch out a little bit. We've got the sports sedan out in front, the Commodore. And as we were saying, the PRB is doing very well. Still up the front of the field. But when we say front of the field, boy, it is a big lot of cars that we've got here at Eastern Creek Raceway. And a good track to do it on as well. 3.93 kilometres long, one of the biggest tracks in Australia, lengthwise. Phillip Island being a bit longer. But if you're going to run a long distance race with this many cars, Eastern Creek's a good circuit to do it on.
Absolutely. Well, in fact, the reason why we chose Eastern Creek is because of its size to take this number of cars. And with 48 teams entered, that's a grid capacity for Eastern Creek, and there's only one other circuit in the country that can handle a larger grid than that, and that's Mount Panorama. So if this race gets any bigger, we'll be going to Bathurst.
Well, Damien Reid went down to the pits and caught up with Chris Barry.
What's the track like out there this morning?
Well, initially it was quite wet and a few spots of oil, so it made it a bit hairy. The last 4 or 5 laps it was starting to dry up, and I had to stick to the wet lines just to try and keep the tyres cool. So the team manager brought me in, and I think the car's gone out on intermediates now. Go down and chase the leaders down.
How is this car handling the conditions compared to the others out there?
Oh, it's very wet inside because you don't have a roof. but like you end up with always a wet elbow. But their handling's very good. They're very nimble, and it's quite controllable in traffic. So you can really weave up through the traffic without having to slow down too much.
Well, they certainly seem like great fun cars to drive, but the man who's doing it out in front at the moment is Team 12, and that's Eric Wilson in the Commodore. 5.7 litres on board with Andrew Hunt. This is a interesting way of looking at the race.
It is. Actually, it's an interesting car. It's a car with a bit of history. It's the ex-George Fury touring car, the ex-Peter Jackson Nissan Skyline, 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged. The team tells me it puts out considerably more horsepower than the old Group A car. And it's been around Bathurst quite a few times, and it's nurtured the likes of Glenn Seaton in its day as well. So it's got a big history, that car.
And of course, that car is going to be one of many that makes its way out onto the track for their team. Warwick Ahern now in the Volvo 142, racing for the Volvo Sporting Car Club. Their team doing very well here today.
Well, the wet and dry conditions make it a bit of a gamble on the day. We nominated lap times for the handicapping last night. We changed them again at 8:30 this morning, and then we were able to change them again at 9:30 this morning when the track was declared wet. But after an hour and a half, we had a fairly dry track, and it was difficult for our drivers to keep to the slower nominated times. The rain's about to start falling again, which will make it much easier for us to run at the slower nominated times.
The Volvos handle the wet okay?
Oh, the Volvos are great in the wet. In fact, their basic race setup probably suits the wet weather conditions better than dead dry.
Well, if you say Volvo and race car, the two don't seem to go together very well, but these guys proving us wrong.
Yeah, they've not a big history of racing in Australia, but they've emulated their British touring car counterparts, and they've even entered 1 or 2 wagons out there. So it's a good effort from those boys. They're really keen, really enthusiastic.
I've noticed complete with the aerodynamic downforce with the rear wing on the back of it.
Oh, absolutely. It needs something, doesn't it?
Need that traction in these wet weather conditions. Well, that comment is a very important one, because this is such a big race, 6 hours, and equipment has just got to be tortured. But I guess one of the factors is it's not always the one car out there for 6 hours.
Well, quite simply, I don't think they'd last. We're talking club budgets, and we see David Wheatley go for a big lose there, the little Mini. I was talking to David yesterday during qualifying, and he said that this car has an amazing pendulum effect when it has a full tank of fuel, because it's hanging over the rear wheels. And once it goes in a big way, as we've just seen.
I'll tell you what, he's lucky that car didn't go off at that position in the dry, because going in sideways at that speed, I wouldn't have liked to have seen that when it might have got a bit of traction on those outside tyres, may have possibly put it up on its side. Just look at this action as they come off Corporate Hill now. This is the back part of the circuit, and a high-speed move round the outside, then down the inside for the right-hander at turn 9 on the Corolla, and that was a nice pass. Another one of the PRBs a little bit further back, and McDonald in the sports and
really chopped him off through there. Absolutely. This car has got a lot of horsepower, not as nimble as the little PRB, and last year they provided a fantastic duel right to the line. The PRBs versus the Winged Warriors, and we see a massive brake lock up there for Wilma Rudder in the little Toyota Corolla production car.
Time to get off the brakes. Now that's a perfect example of what not to do when the front wheels are locked. Should get off the brakes.